If your game has characters that talk, then you need a dialogue system. And if you're using Godot, then I have just the thing for you. Dialog Manager is a powerful branching dialogue system for Godot, and in this video, I'll show you a bunch of stuff to help you get started. Dialog Manager can be thought of as two main things. It's a dialog editor and compiler that lives in the Godot editor, and it's a runtime data store that you can query for lines of dialogue when your game is running. It's headless and stateless, which means it doesn't really have any opinions about how your game is structured or how it looks. That part is up to you. So anyway, let's have a look at Dialog Manager. You can install Dialog Manager through the Asset Store or download it from GitHub or itch. And once you've installed it, don't forget to go into project settings and turn it on. Once you do that, you'll see a dialog tab at the top of the screen. Clicking on it will take you to the main dialog editor window where we can create our first dialog file. The most basic dialog is just some text. But it doesn't mean much unless you know who is talking, so let's add a character name. And we're making video games here, so you probably want some interactivity. For that, we can add some branching dialogue with some response options. Indent underneath each option to show where the dialogue flows to when this option is chosen by the player. We can wrap this block of dialogue in a queue and end jump. Queues are a way to jump to specific places in the dialogue. They are written as lines starting with a tilde and then a unique name. The most common use for queues is starting dialogue from a given line. I'll talk more about that later. The other use for queues is to jump to them from within dialogue. So instead of nesting dialogue under each response, we can instead tell it to jump to a queue when a response is selected. So if we have another little block of dialogue, we can make a response jump to there. Another common scenario is reusable snippets of dialogue. If you have some dialogue that you need to be in a few different places, instead of duplicating it, you can use the jump and return syntax. This will jump to the referenced queue, follow that sequence until it hits an end jump, and then it will return to where it jumped from. Now that we have a little bit of dialogue, we can test it out. Click the Test from Start button to run the dialogue in the test scene. Dialog Manager comes with an example balloon for testing out dialogue in your game. It's a good starting point, but the best thing to do is to create your own balloon that fits with your game. You can create a copy of the example balloon by going to Project, Tools, Dialog, Create Balloon. Pick somewhere in your project and it will save your new balloon there. This initial balloon is deliberately pretty basic. In most cases, it's just enough to get you started, and you can customize it as much as you want. Have a look through the code to see what you need and what you don't need. For simple visual changes, you can do most things by just changing the theme, but the sky is the limit. You can completely change anything you need to. Dialog Manager is just a data source after all. The visuals are entirely up to your imagination and your knowledge of Godot's control nodes. If you want to see some examples of how different balloons might be implemented, then I have a few simple projects up on my itch page, link in the description. For the rest of this video, I'm going to use the custom balloons from my game, Brave as Coconut. Triggering dialogue can be done in a few ways. You can trigger it directly by calling dialogmanager.showDialogBalloon in GDScript or dialogmanager.showDialogBalloon if you're in C#. The arguments for both of these are the same, a dialog resource and a starting queue. So this code will show our dialog balloon with our dialog file starting from the intro queue. Another way to start dialog is with an actionable node. Dialog Manager comes with two actionable nodes, one for 2D and one for 3D. These are extensions of Area 2D and Area 3D, and are meant to be used on characters or objects in the game that would have some attached dialogue. Here in Brave as Coconut, I have a cafe scene. There are a few actionable nodes here for interacting with other characters and for showing flavor text on various things in the room. For Brave as Coconut, I extended the actionable 2D node to add some game-specific stuff, but the one that comes with Dialog Manager simply asks for a dialog resource and a queue to start from. When this actionable has its action method called, it will show the provided dialog starting from the provided queue. Sometimes you'll want your dialog to do or show different things depending on the state of your game. The Dialog Manager runtime is stateless, which means it doesn't keep any state of its own. One of the core philosophies behind Dialog Manager is that it treats your game as the authority on state. So whenever it needs to know something, it asks your game. We can do things like alter the flow of dialogue based on a variable. In this example, we go down one path the first time a character is met and set a flag on this global game state. This line starting with the $sign and angle bracket is called a mutation line. Mutation lines are used to set properties and call methods on nodes. In this case, we use it to set the hasmetNathan flag to true. Then, the second time we encounter them, it will go down the other path. We can also check state values to make responses unavailable. To do this, we wrap a condition inside square brackets and add a self-closing slash to the end. Now, depending on your balloon logic, this will either disable the response or hide it completely. There are a few ways to expose state to Dialog Manager, but the two simplest are via globals and via context nodes. All globals in your game are automatically exposed to dialog, so if you have any auto loads, they're already available. Using context nodes requires a tiny bit of setup. Somewhere in the scene tree, you can add a dialog state context node. Give it an alias. This will be what we use to refer to it in dialog, and point it to the node you want to expose in dialog. In this example, I have a context node called Nathan, and I've pointed it to the root node of this character scene. Now, when Nathan is in a scene, he is directly referenceable in dialog. So here, when we talk to Nathan, we can make him turn to Coco. This line is another example of a mutation. By default, mutations will wait until they are finished before advancing to the next line of dialog, but you can ignore that with an extra angle bracket. There are more advanced ways to expose state to the Dialog Manager runtime, but they're out of scope for this video. If you're ever unsure what globals or context nodes are available at any given time in a scene, you can check the dialog debugger. When the game is running, open the debugger and there will be a dialog tab that contains some dialog information. There is a list of the currently known sources of state being exposed to dialog. There's also a history of dialog that has been run so far. You can click on the resource reference to jump to that line of dialog in the editor. One important feature of any good dialog system is localization, and Dialog Manager has you covered there. Dialog Manager integrates directly into Godot's own translation system to make the process as seamless as possible. When you export a template file, be it a POT file or CSV file, all of the lines in your dialog files will be included. By default, the lines themselves are the translation keys, but you can generate static line IDs if you need to. You can either generate them for the current file or generate them across your entire project. This is especially handy if you're including voice-acted lines. One of the example projects I have up on itch demonstrates using these static IDs to handle voice acting across multiple languages. There's a lot more to Dialog Manager that I didn't cover in this video. Stuff like tags, random lines, concurrent lines, and heaps more. If you're interested in going deeper, then have a read over the documentation. If you need a little help, then check out the example projects on itch or join the Little Nebula Discord and ask the friendly community. If you want to support Dialog Manager, then buying the example projects goes a long way. I also have a Patreon where I share other handy Godot stuff. And if your project is big enough to have a budget for a consultant, then reach out and we'll have a chat about what we can do for you. And that's all there is from me for now. So until next time, bye.